Okay. Well, as I said, we're very excited about working with you on our materials. The beta materials we're going to be working with are actually an expansion of our current adapted curriculum. Now, I know both Northeast Metro and Mahtomedi have different parts of our curriculum, Heidi. And these beta materials are an expansion of our adapted materials. We've developed all kinds of new materials to go with those, and we want to walk through those today. Amy's going to walk through those with us. All right, and I'm going to put up the materials. We're going to talk in depth about these in a few moments, but Amy wants to just first give you an overview of what we're going to be looking at with the beta. Amy?
Okay, so these are the things that we're going to ask each group to kind of do. And so there's a student profile. We've emailed the Excel form, and if you just fill this in, you can use student names, or you can use initials if you don't want us to know their names, or just first names would be okay. If you just fill in the chart across, you'll give us enough information that we need. We're currently running this in 4 sites in Kentucky, and so what we're looking at, we're trying to figure out at what level this curriculum is going to be most beneficial for. So that's why we need to know like their test scores, what they're being served for in education. We're going to ask that you use the curriculum 2 to 4 hours per week in the order that it's presented. And then there's a few things we need you to return to us. So all students will take a pretest, and then your instruction that you do daily, there will be data sheets that we're going to ask you to turn in. There are visual schedules that I'll show you in a minute, and you can either turn the visual schedules in, or there's a place on the data sheets for you to record the information we need from those visual schedules. So it's up to you if you want to either, we'll talk about that more when we get to it. And then when you finish when all of the students have mastered the lessons, they'll do a post-test. And so when you get to the end, we just ask that you send us that as well. And then there'll be an exit questionnaire. This is for the teachers to fill out. It's kind of your perception. It's I think a 10-question survey, and then a place for you to write down anything. On your data sheets, there's a place to write down anecdotal notes. So if something really interesting happens during one of your sessions, you can write it there, and then you can actually transfer that over to the questionnaire, or you can just leave it on the data sheet, just so that we can get some anecdotal information.
Okay, before we start getting into the binder, Heidi, Amy and I did want to confirm with you about our time frames. We had planned on about an hour. I know we started late, but are our teachers, do we still have that much time? Are we in more of a hurry today?
Our teachers need to leave here by shortly before 9:20 to start their first block of class.
Did you say 9:20?
9:20, they have to go to class.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. That helps. All righty. Okay.
Okay. All right, you ready for me to keep going?
Yes, we'll get their binders out, Amy. We'll keep going now that we know about our time frames, too.
Okay. So if you guys have your binders in front of you, if you just open it, you'll see the table of contents. And this just tells you what is included under each tab in your binder. So that's just there for you to refer back to. Then if you turn to tab A, you will see, well, all these things are listed in there, but if you advance forward, I think it talks about each one of these. Right, so the read me first, this just gives you an overview of the unit, and you guys can read this. I'm not going to read it to you, but it just kind of gives you, it tells you kind of what's in each tab, and it gives you a little bit more explanation than the table of contents does. And if you advance, there's a scope and sequence that starts on page 5. So if you're looking at that, in column 1, this is the typical classroom activities. So you guys actually have access to an additional binder that that additional binder has these typical classroom activities. This would be for students who aren't at the level of needing this adapted binder. So you can kind of see how it was adapted for, or how it's been adapted from the typical classroom scope and sequence, if you're interested in looking at it. I have one site that actually has 2 students who are working, I believe, from the typical binder. They made 100 on all the pre-tests in the adapted, so they just didn't need that level of instruction. Then there's the adapted project discovery activity. And then we have alternative activities listed in the 3rd column. So it just kind of tells you, kind of shows you how each one is laid out. You guys can read through that.
Can I just interrupt really quickly and ask, just to clarify? So in column 1, the typical, that would be the base beginning level table service binder, and they didn't get that. They just got the adapted binder, right? And so they'll use the adapted binder to use column 2 and 3, which are the lowest functioning students, and column 1 would be a little higher functioning, and they won't work with that base binder. Is that correct?
Well, Heidi, if some of them have students that they think are a little higher, we certainly could get them the regular typical binder. So after we finish the webinar today, if you could talk with them about that, we'd be glad to get them that regular binder as well.
Yeah, they're all nodding their heads yes, so I think that would be really good if they have that to work in conjunction with the adapted.
Okay. We have a pretty large variety of cognitive abilities in our program, ranging from mild, moderate, low cognitive, all the way up to almost gifted, talented levels. So we have pretty big, broad range of needs.
Right. Well, and of course, the focus of these new beta materials is for students with autism that are on our lower functioning end. So that's why we just, we have that. But we can certainly send that other binder as well, Heidi. We'll talk about that and get that to them.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll move on.
All right, and so then after your scope and sequence, you'll see, it'll say table service teaching strategies. It includes the suggested order of implementation, data collection procedures, the curriculum components, some specifics on prompting procedures to use, a couple of introductory activities, and then some online resources. So the suggested order of implementation, so this is the order that we've kind of suggested that you follow.
I'm sorry, Heidi, was there
Did you have a question?
Well, I was just pointing out to them that they have CDs in the back of the binder, and that all the teachers, they can load that to their server, and then all the teachers in this room can access everything that's in this binder is the electronic files, and so then they can access it. And because I have one binder here with so many teachers, and I'm trying to page through it, and they can't really see what I'm paging through. So I just wanted to let them know that they'll have access to all of these files at the end of this.
Good, good. We were going to talk about the CD later, but I'm glad you brought that up, Heidi. Thanks.
Okay, so there's some introductory activities. They start on page. I'm not really sure where they are in here. I think it's after the time delay, actually. Page 11. It just gives you like different things that you might do to kind of either introduce table setting or to expand on for some of it. Like person. Oh, go ahead.
10 through 13, Amy.
Okay.
10, yes.
Yeah, there you go. You guys can just look through those. It might just give you an idea of somewhere to start to introduce them to the topic. There's a PowerPoint pretest that do we talk about this? Yeah,
right, we'll talk about that further.
Actually, I think we talk about all of these things
in a minute. We go into this.
Yeah. Right, this is just the order that you might want to do it. So you can administer the pretest, then teach the vocabulary, then watch the first look at table service PowerPoint. Then there's a student instruction PowerPoint for each lesson, then a video model for each lesson. Then we've added in a teacher model so they can actually see the teacher model, the steps in the lesson. And then there's a visual schedule that matches the video model. So that can be a strategy that you give them so they can do it more independently. And then when they master all of the activities in this binder, you administer the post-test.
So can I kind of, they can't see all this stuff. They can't really see all this stuff that you're talking about.
We're going to show them on the screen in just a moment. Heidi, will that help?
Yeah, it will, because I'm sitting here with the binder trying to get to these pages to kind of show them, but yeah, it's not really working out so good. That'd be great.
Yes, we're going to walk through each of them in just a moment.
Okay, so there's two different types of data collection that we're going to ask you to collect. One is with the pre-post test. So there's actually the pre-test and post-test are the same, and you can present it on a PowerPoint. It's on the CD that Heidi was telling you about. And we have a data sheet, like a recording sheet, that you can use to record the students' answers. So you just ask them, for example, which one is a fork. If they point to C, you just mark C on the recording sheet. Or if they pick the D, which is fork, you just record that. And then there are data sheets for each lesson. And so this is where we're going to ask you to collect data every time you teach a lesson. So on this one, Heidi, can you ask the teachers in the room if they're familiar with system of least prompts or constant time delay? Are those terms familiar?
Time delay. What did you say? The system of least prompts and time delay. If they're familiar with that.
Yes.
I'm looking with like bug eyes, so I'm thinking maybe not like physical. Like physical.
Okay, we'll get there in a minute then.
Okay, well, I'll give some more information on that in a minute.
Okay.
But
and the data sheet, we can kind of see it, but we can't. It's kind of blurry, but I can kind of see. Get your materials, wash your hands, place the table, place the placemat, all these sub-tasks within the activity, and I can see that it's a data sheet where they're going to collect, but we can't really read the bottom of it too much, what it says. So yeah.
We've got a sheet coming up that will show it, I think, a little better, Heidi.
Okay.
All right, so why don't we move forward to that? Okay, so these are the components of the curriculum. We're going to get into each of these. These are the different, each binder includes all these things. So we have vocabulary boards and cards, introductory worksheets, a first look PowerPoint. It comes with audio. Student instructions. It's a book, but it's also on the PowerPoint. There's worksheets that go with each of them, and then the visual schedules and the video model. And they all should align with each other. The student instructions, the visual schedules, and the video model all have the same exact sequence. They all use similar or the same pictures. So it should be a nice repetition for your students.
Right.
Okay, so there's two different types of prompting procedures that we've suggested the teachers use. And you don't need to be able to read this when you get your binders. It's in there. Is it also on the CD, Shelley?
Yes, yes.
So basically, if you're going to teach a chained task, which just means a task that has more than one step to it, so for example, setting the table would have more than one step, we would use something called system of least prompts. And what this means is you give the student the ability to do each task in the task analysis independently. If they can't do it independently, then we use a prompt. We suggested maybe an auditory prompt where you tell them what to do, and then maybe a model prompt, and then a full physical prompt. It depends on the population you're working with as to which prompts you use. You might use a visual prompt. You might not do model. If your students are just going to remodel back what you do, it may not work for them. So you can decide that as a teacher. There's directions and examples in the binder for how to use it.
Yeah, that's on page 7, Heidi, if you can, if there's a couple of binders there.
Yeah. So we gave a definition, the steps for using it, and an example of how it would look.
Okay. There it is. We're passing it around. Nikki's going to open up her binder. She just didn't want to make noise opening the cellophane, but she's getting hers out.
It's still going to go. That's okay, Nikki.
So they're opening it up, and it seems like, so what you said is, just so I understand, you said it's called system release prompt. Is that what you?
Release. No. System
Okay.
release. It means that you're going to allow the student. It means you're going to allow the student to complete each step with the least amount of prompts necessary. So if they can do a step independently, right? And then if they need a model for one of the steps, they might need a full physical prompt for one of the steps, but you're allowing them to do it with the least amount of prompts needed.
Was that another question?
I'm just trying to find it in Nikki's binder. Page 7 didn't have that. Okay. Yep.
I think they start over being renumbered halfway through A.
I think we found it. So they're passing around the binders and kind of discussing it and looking at it. You guys seem to understand what she's, are you picking up what she's putting down? All right, they're ready to go roll. It's just me. I'm learning here too. So.
Well, and Heidi, there's a scale actually on page 3 of what Amy was discussing as far as a rating scale depending on the prompt, how many points. And that's what we're going to transfer to the data sheet, and we'll look at that in a moment. But as they do the activities, you know, Amy's going to explain how to rate this on that data sheet. That'll be one of the key things we look at.
It'll make sense in a minute when you see the data sheet.
Right. Yeah, okay. They're all with you.
Okay.
Okay.
Then go back 1 second.
All right.
I'm going to talk about time delay just really quick. Time delay is where you're working on something more discrete, like teaching a vocabulary word. And so we typically use something called time delay, which is where we ask them to like point to the fork, or we ask them, what is it? So what is it? And we want them to say it's a fork. So we give them a specific amount of time between our task direction and then the prompt. And most often teaching vocabulary, if it's a verbal response, then the prompt will be a verbal prompt. So I'll say, what is it? I wait 3 seconds. If they don't give me an answer, I say, it's a fork. What is it? It's a fork. If it's pointing, you know, a receptive task where I've laid out pictures and I ask them to touch the fork, I'll wait 3 seconds and then I'll physically prompt their hand to touch the picture of the fork. That's just the difference. We use time delay usually when it's not a change task, but we're just teaching maybe like the vocabulary. And then we do system release prompt when we're teaching the activities that have like, you know, 17 or 18 steps.
That makes sense to all you guys? Okay, they're picking up what you're putting down still.
Okay.
And there again, there's directions. Like page 9 outlines the steps. Page 10 gives an example. So I think if they read that, it'll make more sense.
Right.
Before they begin the first activity, there are some introductory activities that include some worksheets. They're just worksheets that get them kind of used to the terminology we're going to be talking about, some of the pictures. I think the really cool part is the vocabulary board. So if you have students, well, any student should be introduced to the vocabulary before you start. But a lot of the sites I'm using actually have laminated these vocabulary boards and are using them while they're teaching because they have students who may not be able to talk. So that it gives their students a way to communicate about what they're learning about, even though they don't have the words. So there's several vocabulary boards, should introduce them to all those key words. There are different, there's some vocabulary words that have 9 pictures, some that have 6. So if your student can't handle 9 pictures at a time, but they can handle 6, if they can only handle 3 at a time, cut them apart. So these are also on the CD, so you can print them out and then customize them however you need to.
Right. Okay, we'll move on to the next tab. Any questions before we move on, Heidi?
No, they're with us.
Great.
Okay, so if you turn to tab B, this will give you directions for administering the test. This is the pre and post test. We suggest putting it up on a PowerPoint so that they can actually interact with a larger screen. A couple of the sites that we're using have students that can't access touching the bigger part and they're not talking. So they've printed them out in color, and then each, we have one student that's using eye gaze to answer the questions, and so we just put it in front of the students, wherever he's looking, and then he uses eye gaze to answer the questions. Using the PowerPoint up on a big screen is a little bit too big for him. The pre-post test starts on, well, it's like, on page, I guess on page 3 under tab B. So you can kind of see what it looks like, but this is exactly what it looks like. During the pre-test and post-test, you shouldn't be giving any feedback. So we're not going to prompt students during this part. So we're just going to ask, for example, number 1, which one is a fork? If they get it right, the PowerPoint goes to this grade slide, which is what you see the second one. What happens if they get it wrong, Shelley?
It goes straight to the next question. That's part of the errorless learning technique. Only the right answer is supported with a reinforcement. So if they miss it, it will just simply go to the next question.
And you can, if you have students who need reinforcement, you can provide verbal praise for, that was a great job touching the screen, or that was a great job sitting, or a great job trying, but just don't prompt them to the right answer. Because we want them to learn through the activities, not through the test.
Right.
So if you go through the test, it's a little bit long. You keep flipping through, you'll see a score report form, and I think that's on the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So this, you're just going to write the student's name, and you can make an answer key if you want, but we really need to know if they got it correct or incorrect. And that prompt column really shouldn't be there. I meant to tell you that, Shelley. I discovered that in my first training and just forgot to tell you. Okay. We're not going to prompt them, so just ignore that prompt column. So they either get it correct or incorrect. You're going to save this data sheet because on their post test, you're going to use the same form just to keep it easy. Then you'll mark post if they get it correct or incorrect. Do you guys have any questions about that? This one's pretty straightforward.
And then, Heidi, this is actually the form we'll need back for each student, their pre-test form and, of course, their post-test.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
All right. So then, under tab C, and this seems kind of overwhelming, but once you get to tab D, it's kind of the same for the rest of the binder. Tab C includes the first look at table service, and so this is also a nice PowerPoint. So you can put this up. This introduces them also to the vocabulary, but in a different way. It's a lot more written ways of introducing it. There's audio with it, so it'll read it to them, but it kind of introduces them to each activity. So when you start the PowerPoint, it kind of goes through like table service, waiters, waitresses, tell us what they do. And then on slide, I'm guessing it's slide 15, if this is exactly the number of slides, it'll say now do activity 1. So when you get to that slide, you're going to stop this first lookbook and you're going to turn to tab D. Right? So the PowerPoint tells you exactly what it'll say now, do activity 1. And then you turn to tab D and there's activity 1. When they master activity 1, you're going to start with slide 16 on the PowerPoint, and it will tell you when to stop. It'll say now stop, or say now do activity 2, which you'll find under tab E. So it kind of just goes in order that same way. So the first look, you just show it that one time, and then you start activity 1. Then they'll stay in activity 1 until the majority of your students master the skill. Once that happens, then you'll go back to the first lookbook, activity 2, taking an order, and you'll watch it the first time, then you'll go to tab E, and you'll stay in tab E until the majority of your students have mastered that activity. Does that make sense?
Everyone, yep, everyone's nodding their head.
All right, so if you turn to tab D, so the good thing from here on out is tabs for all the activities, which this one I think has 3 activities. So tab D, E, and F are laid out exactly the same, just a different activity.
Right.
So each under tab D, you'll see teacher instructions, the data sheet that goes with activity 1, the visual schedule that goes with activity 1, student instructions that go with activity 1, and worksheets 5 through 8. If you were to look at tab D, you would see teacher instructions, a new data sheet, a new visual schedule, new student instructions, and then worksheets 9 through maybe 12. Okay? So the teacher instructions just give you, it kind of tells you what the activities are going to be. It tells you what types of skills the activity is going to, like the different manipulative skills, conceptual skills, and acquired knowledge that the activity will focus on. It has a scope and sequence laid out just like the other scope and sequence. So there's a typical classroom activity, an adaptive project, which that's the binder you guys are in, and then some alternative worksheets. Okay. And then you'll see the data sheet. So this is maybe a little bit bigger, so I'll walk you kind of through it. So it says, number 1, gathers all materials. So you're going to write on here, you're going to select your prompt level. So on this data sheet, this says independent, gesture, auditory verbal, visual picture, model, partial physical, full physical, or they could do a no response. If you wanted to take away some of these prompt levels, that is completely fine. You would just need to adjust your points. So the way we have it, if they do something independently, they get 6 points. If they require a gesture, they get 5 points. If they get an if they require auditory verbal, they get 4 points. But let's say you just wanted to use independent, model, and full physical. Independent would get 2 points. Model would get 1 point. Full physical will always get 0 because it requires full physical prompting. They're not going to get credit for that. The reason we suggest using points is that you have some students that will move from requiring full physical for all 16 steps to requiring a variety of prompt levels, but they may not reach independence. If we only mark if they can do it independently or not, it won't show progress. But if we record the points earned based on the level of independence they're showing, then we can show that they've made a lot of progress even if they aren't independent. So that's going to come in handy for the students who don't master the skill but are making progress in the curriculum. Does that make sense?
Everyone? Yep, makes sense for them.
There are directions in the under System of Least prompts or right before it under tab A that explains this further and explains about choosing your prompt levels and adjusting your points earned. But it's really nice for those students who are pretty low functioning. You can actually show their families they've made gains. If you were just doing independent or not, they wouldn't be making any progress. So also on the data sheet is this how did I do and did you like it, setting the table. And you can't see it, but it's a smiley face, a straight face, and a sad face. So in a minute, you're going to see where we get this information. But that information comes from their visual schedule. So it's really easy. They're going to choose that answer, and then you'll just record their answer on this data sheet. We ask that you collect data on the activity every time you do the activity with the students, so we can actually see the progress they're making. Here's the visual schedule. It follows the same exact 16 steps in that data sheet. So number one here is gather all materials. Number one on the data sheets, also gather all materials. When they finish using the visual schedule, you're going to ask them, or they're supposed to ask themselves, how did I do? So you can ask them, how did you do? And if they pick the smiley face, then on the data sheet, you just circle the smiley face. And then ask them, did you like setting the table? This is where we're going to get a little bit of social validity to see, like, do the students, once they learn how to do the skill, do they perceive liking to do it better? It'll vary depending on students. So this visual schedule should support them completing the task. If they use the visual schedule to complete the task, we consider that an independent completion. So that's not a visual prompt would be that you're pointing to this visual, you're pointing to wiping the table, that picture, to prompt them. But if the student goes through and they can complete the task all by themselves with this visual schedule, we would count that as independent. So when we designed this schedule, we intended for this to be printed out every time they did it, and they would check off when they were done. They would circle how they did, and then you would collect this in a binder. But I'm working with 4 different sites, and all 4 sites said it's too cumbersome to reprint this out. So they've all printed it and laminated it. Some of the students are checking it off. Some don't need that level of support. And that's why you can, if you want to just laminate it and reuse it, just make sure you ask them those 2 questions at the end and then transfer it onto the data sheet. So looking back, as a teacher, I taught, in schools for a long time. I probably would have laminated it too, because I think we have one site that has 18 students. So to print this off 18 times, and if it takes 4 to 5 times of going through this to master it, that's a lot of color copies and a lot of paper to keep up with. So I think their way of managing it is probably more applicable to a classroom, just not. But you're welcome to print it out and use a new one every time if that's what you want. Do you guys have questions about that?
No, they're following you perfectly.
Okay.
All right, we'll look at the student instructions.
All right. Yeah, there's student instructions. Oh, wait, go back to that data sheet just really quick.
Okay.
One more. Oh, it's not on there. You will actually have on your data sheet, it says check which component of the curriculum you used.
Oh, right.
So session 1, we asked that you use all of them, the student instruction PowerPoint, the video modeling, the teacher model, and the visual schedule. Then for sessions 2 and 3, we just want you to tell us which ones you chose to use. The sites I'm working with are choosing to use all of them every day. They're working with some pretty low functioning students. If your students are higher, they may not require every single component every time. So just check which ones you used. If you go into session 4 or 5, it doesn't matter. You don't have to tell us. We just want to know for sessions 2 and 3. You'll see it's actually on the data sheet, and there's a little checkbox. You just check it off if you used it. All right, you can go ahead to the.
Right, and just to reiterate, Heidi.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Here, just to reiterate, as we're walking through this, I hope they're starting to see now that those student instructions we're going to talk about on the PowerPoint and the visual schedules and the video modeling, as Amy said earlier, they're all the same. They all complement each other and reinforce and support each other. So I just want to, reiterate that. We'll look at the student instructions. Actually, that's next, Amy.
Okay. So the student instructions are also on a PowerPoint. So you just show it to the students as activity 1, setting a table. It tells them what they're going to need. So those are the items that they will need to get. And then it goes through the series of steps in the same order that the video model and in a very similar order to the data sheet. So you go through that with a PowerPoint. And then you show them the video model, which is on a separate CD in the back. It gives them a step-by-step. It just brings the student instructions to life. So it's the exact same instructions. It's just presented on a video. One thing I saw one of my sites do that I thought was really nice is that they went over the student instructions, and then she put the video model in. And when she did the video model, she gave them their visual activity schedule, so they could follow along with that while the video was happening. I thought that was I thought that was nice. So they'll watch the video, and then after the video, the teacher should model doing it. So it's just one more example. So we're providing lots of examples for how to do the same activity. So this should help with their generalization to actually getting the materials and doing it themselves. There are worksheets with each activity. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 worksheets, I think, with this one. The way the sites in Kentucky are using them is that, so they do the student instruction book, they do the video model, they do the teacher model, and then the teachers are kind of assessing them one-on-one. This is not mandatory. You can assess them at the group, so each person can take a turn. But I think there was a lot of waiting. So like I said, one of our sites has 15 or 18 students. We've divided them into 2 groups, but that's still a lot of students to manage. So the instructional assistants are working on things like the vocabulary boards, those introductory activities. They're still working on those, like cleaning the table thoroughly and working on, practicing, like introducing yourself to somebody, the different activities like that. And they're also working on the worksheets while the teacher is assessing the student going through the actual activity to collect that data. But that's how they're using the worksheets. They're just meant to be something that's related to what they're doing, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the activity itself. They're mostly academic in nature.
Right.
Or pre-academic. Mm-hmm. And then if you, tabs E and F follow the exact same layout, same order, everything, just a different activity as tab D. Tab G, there are expansion activities in this one. So tab G, H, and I are just extension activities. So you'll see they look a little bit different than the other ones, but it just gives you like something else you can do with the same topic.
Right. It also offers the opportunity, in particular with this kit, with table setting, we have the waiter, waitresses, then we have customers, and it gives the students the opportunity to switch roles and experience both sides.
Yeah, that's nice. And there's more worksheets and opportunities for role playing, give them little situational cards. So just, you can really take this to an, it just expands their knowledge on this topic. Mm-hmm. And then tab J has a community-based instruction experience, so it gives you an idea of something you could do to actually take the skills they've learned and then sometimes apply it or see it in action in the community. It comes with a social story. This is also on a PowerPoint. The nice thing about the PowerPoints is you can print them off if you need to. So I know my students needed to take their social story into the community with them. We had to read it before we went and then on the bus and then when we got there. So you can actually print it out. If you wanted to make a book for them to take with them, you can do that. And then after that, it has a template for writing a letter to the place that you went to visit and writing a report about what they did, what they saw, the different things they experienced on the CBI trip. So if you guys have the opportunity to go into the community, we highly suggest that once they've mastered, all of the activities in this binder, that you would take them into the community. And then under tab K, there is a bingo game. The students love bingo. There's some really higher level academics, like there's a geometric plane activity to maybe even tied into your alternate assessments. These are activities that can be used anytime. They don't have to be, you don't have to use them just at the end. So again, if you're pulling students one-on-one to assess their ability to do each activity, your instructional assistants can have a game of bingo going on. And so your students can be playing bingo with the vocabulary, you know, so we can maximize instructional time instead of having everyone wait for each student to go through it. There is a CD that is in the back of your binder, and it goes along with the tabs. So everything that's in this binder you can find on the CD. You can print it out. Like I said, if you have a student who needs you to adapt this for them, if a vocabulary board of 6 is too many, you can take it down to 3. All of the worksheets are in here, so you can make, you know, color copies if they need it in color. The first look books and the activity book, the student instructions, they're all PowerPoints, but if you have a student who needs the book, you can print the PowerPoint out, cut it apart, and make a book for them. So that's a really nice addition to it. So you have all of the materials that are in this binder. You have them available on that CD. And there's also a video model CD where all the video models live.
Right.
Okay.
So are there any questions? We went through that pretty fast.
Scheduling, I mean, if you guys scheduling and we have the schedule, and so the expectation is that they'll run with these kits 2 to 4 hours a week through, we have the implementation period as November through January.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of January or sometime in January, that's when we'd be looking for the data sheet and the pre and post test back. Right. And I'm your main point person, so any questions that you have, they'll work through me, and then I'll funnel them over to you, Shelley, and Dr. Spriggs. You guys have questions about scheduling or classroom implementation, or do you visualize how you're going to do this? That's what I'm kind of wondering. How many students are you? How many students are you expecting? Is their question?
In our sites, in the sites in Kentucky, what we did, now I don't know how your classes are set up there, but we had them do the pretest on every student in their class during the period they're teaching it. And if someone made 100, they really can't be a part of this. They can be a part of the activities, right? You can also have students, like we have a student who isn't even communicating really well with eye gaze, so he participates partially. He's not part of the beta. We're not collecting data on him, but he gets to, they're doing a different curriculum, but he gets to hold the baby. He gets to pick the outfit the baby's wearing. You know, like he can make those kinds of decisions. Like he can look at which outfit. So we have some kids that are partially participating. We have some kids that made 100, so they're not. So we just ask them to include, I think we have a range of 6 to maybe 11 in one group.
What are the average sizes of their classes, Heidi?
I'm going to let them talk. Caitlin, why don't you talk?
So we're sitting here brainstorming kind of our low cognitive students right now. We have, in entirety, we only have 30 students in our entire program. So realistically, we would be on the very low end of that 6 to 11. When we're looking at low cognitive, we're probably looking at about 6 that we would take data on that would really fit. We might have other kids that might benefit from this, but if you're really looking for the true low cognitive students, then that would be about half of them.
Yeah, my meter will be the same. I know I've sent information for 10 students, but when I think about when I look at that, I know probably half of them are probably get 100 on that pretest the way it looks. And then I will still plan to do pre-parent. They're both kind of broken up to 5 already. So there's probably going to be 4 to 5 kids who will be your beta.
Heidi, that was breaking up. Heidi, that was breaking up a little for me, but did I hear maybe 4 to 5? Is that what she said?
Yeah, Nikki says 4 to 5 for her, and Northeast Metro will be about 6 students that are really the lower functioning. That
would be our highest. Like we'd probably be between 4 and 6 as well.
They're both about between 4 and 6 students each on the test. It sounds like after looking at the pre-test and considering what you said.
Okay.
I think that's okay. I mean, I think, you know, our class sizes range from 4 to about 12. You know, just depending on where you are. So I think that would be okay.
Yeah,
you may have some higher kids that can't do it. If you have higher kids that don't.
Okay, I'm brainstorming right now with our instructional coach. We have another 18 to 21 program that focuses more of the severe, profound, and mostly impaired students. And some of their more moderate to higher functioning kids really fit the bill for this. So I'm thinking maybe we could partner with them just to have we'd have 4, maybe 4 or 5 of our kids, 3 or 4 or 5 of our kids. And maybe we could borrow a kid or 2 of theirs. And they'll work them into the classes here. So I would have to reach out to the manager of that program and the instructional coach at that program, but that's a possibility if we want more data.
Right. Amy, don't you think, I know we have some students in the Kentucky sites that are in that population she's talking about, so don't you think that would be acceptable as long as we have the profiles and know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
You'll have we have a few too that are really low functioning that aren't responding, and we can't. They're doing a different kit. So we have 2 little girls that won't touch the baby doll, and we don't know if it's because we've taught them for 5 years that it's not age appropriate to play with the baby doll. They won't even touch it; they push it away. We have a little bit of that going on with some of our lower students. So then we have this small little group of really high students that just already knew what to do. They passed that pretest. So that would be where the other binder might become useful or beneficial. You really wanted to to still do these activities, but there's a huge gap from this binder to that binder though with a level of support. It's a lot of written corrections. One picture to a lot of sentences. It looks a whole lot different. But even if maybe they're not part of the beta, but you could piecemeal it together, if they need a visual schedule to go with that activity, it might be okay. Just for them to do the activity, they wouldn't be part of the beta, but they could still participate with learning how to do these activities.
Okay.
And really quick, I just want to make sure that they know that moving from activity 1 to activity 2 is based on the majority of the students. So not every student has to master it, because you may have 1 or 2 that just don't respond to it, or that are making progress, but it's going to be a while. So we don't want to hold up the whole class, for 1 student that's not making the progress.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
I told my teachers if they have, let's say you have 5 students and 3 have mastered it, but that 4th student, if he had 1 more chance, he'd probably master it. Give him 1 more chance. But if there's just no progress being made, we just need to move on. That's kind of what I told them to do.
Heidi, I know we've been trying to be very aware and sensitive to their time, and I know some of the teachers need to leave, but if Nikki and Aaron are staying, Amy and I can certainly stay on the phone and talk further with you. What are your needs there?
I guess at this point, I don't have any other questions. What I want to do then is reach out to our other transition programs and kind of brainstorm a list of kids that they might think are applicable and see how we can partner with them, just so we could get a little more data.
Sure. And
a little group of kids to work with. And so if it sounds like you guys are okay with that, and if that works for us, that would be great. And if not, then we'll just proceed with our 4 to 6 kids who we know of.
Right. I think that would be great, and we would be interested in that. Don't you, Amy? I think that would be very good.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Okay. All right. So that's what I will work with Christy here at Wells North, and Christy and I will work with the instructional coach and the manager of Wells South, and we'll see if we can't pull a core group of kids and figure out how to implement this across both sites.
If we were to do that, can we get a second kit because we're at 2 different sites? So one for Wells South, one for North.
Right. What we're trying to do in the beta is 2 kits. We're trying to do the table service and the child care. Now, I think Nikki, correct me, Nikki, but I think you only have time right now to do the 1 kit. But if Northeast has time to also do the child care, we would like to do that as well.
Yes, we could do that.
Great. 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 Okay, Heidi, any other questions? We're certainly glad to stay on here, but I know some of them may need to leave now.
I think we're good. Any other questions, you guys? No, I think we're good. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Oh, no, I'm sorry we had to kind of rush, but I hope we certainly gave you, a good enough overview to get going.
Yep. Yeah, you did. Thank you. Yeah, let me know if they have questions. I know. We will.
Great. Great. And any questions, please feel free to call us. Both Amy and I will be glad to help and in any way we can.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
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 Heidi has left the meeting.